the complete and annotated edition. And I believe I'm on section 8 of chapter, what chapter is this? Chapter 2. So chapter 2, section 8, which is the miracles as the means of healing. I'm sorry, no, that's not it. That's not right. Where is this? Where am I? 8. There you go. There was the sole responsibility of the miracle worker. That's what that's about. So if you're tuning in, wanting a reading, that was last hour. So that's what I was doing before. So now we are doing our study group time. And you're welcome to ask questions regarding the material or any kind of spiritual discussion or any kind of conversation that has to do with the topic. Personal questions, I'm going to skip over those. So FYI, if you're on Facebook and YouTube, you might get hit by a troll. So just FYI, you may need to block and report that person as a harasser. Yeah, I know. I love the study groups too. Sometimes I'm just like, I get in the mood where I just like want to shut down mentally. I'm like, I don't want to do it today. But then after I get doing it, I'm like, I love this. It's one of those things, like, right, where it's like, you're going to have to put a lot of work into it, even just the processing or the mental work. But then once you actually do it, you're like, I love this. So, and so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read some parts of it. I did not prepare notes today, guys, so I'm going to like wing it, which is fine. That's no problem. But I'm going to stop whenever I'm reading something to kind of go over it, because I'm just going to kind of read it as if I'm reading it live, and then I have to kind of figure some things out there. So hope y'all are doing well. Again, if y'all have any questions surrounding the material, feel free to ask that. Questions I'm not going to respond because this is distracting me. When we're trying to get into that state of mind where we essentially line up with synchronicities, with miracles, with the flow state, within alignment. We're trying to like line up with that. We're trying to get into that state. There is a state of mind that goes along with it. It's not just, I hope I am able to get into alignment and then after that it sticks. No, you have to sustain a state of mind to keep that going, to have that continue to happen for you. What I mean by that is, for example, let's say someone is trying to lose a little weight because they feel heavy, and they decide one day they're going to take a good step in the right direction that aligns with the idea of being healthier, and so they eat healthy. That doesn't mean that they're going to be healthy for the rest of their life, or that that's going to basically stick and then they don't have to do anything else. You still have to work on it. You still have to work towards implementing this mindedness, this right-mindedness, this proper perspective about it on a regular basis. So you have to continue to implement, continue to sustain that state of mind. If you don't sustain that state of mind, these synchronicities, these things that you're trying to experience on a regular basis are not going to stick. They're just going to completely, go away with whatever shakes you out of your mind, your state of mind. So when they talk about right-mindedness, it's talking about the idea of having the right state of mind to interact and engage and flow and sync up with all of these beautiful synchronicities. So going back to this, however, as a creative act, the miracle need not await the right-mindedness of the receiver. In fact, its purpose is to restore him to his right mind, but it is essential that the miracle worker be in his right mind, or he will be unable to reestablish right-mindedness in someone else. There are times when we will end up syncing up or becoming aligned or getting into that flow state, even if it's just circumstance, which is never circumstance. You did something to achieve that, but it might not be something you do consistently or on a regular basis. But when it happens, even if it happens once out of the blue or once out of out of your norm, it is meant to wake you up. It is meant to help you understand what's available to you. It's meant to help you understand that there is a grander reason why things are happening. There is something behind the scenes. There is a wizard behind the curtain. I think it's our way of understanding that message from the universe. So in knowing that and understanding that and knowing that you do have the ability to experience a life that feels very miraculous and feels very synced up and so forth, it's supposed to get you to take more steps or take more action towards that kind of alignment, towards that kind of mindset that brought you there to begin with. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't react in that way. They don't even take the hint and they just keep going. And this is why they talk about whenever life is trying to tell you something, it first will throw a crumb at you, and then it'll throw a rock or a stone. And then at some point, the bricks start falling off the wall. Most people will do something when they get hit by all those bricks falling on them. They don't actually take steps or actions to shift their energy or to become more aligned with the state of being that would be beneficial to them. The healer who relies on his own readiness is endangering his understanding. He is perfectly safe as long as he is completely unconcerned about his readiness, but maintains a consistent trust in mind. Errors of this kind produce some very erratic behavior, which usually points up and that's a weird way of saying that. Usually points up an underlying unwillingness to cooperate. These errors inevitably introduce inefficiency into the miracle worker's behavior and temporarily disrupts his miracle mindedness. I'm going to read that again because there's a few pieces here that I want to break down here. The healer who relies on his own readiness is endangering his understanding. He is perfectly safe as long as he is completely unconcerned about his readiness. So the way I would describe this is the idea that we have to be in a very specific place or state of mind or state of being, or just certain things have to be lined up in a certain way for us to be able to do our work or to be able to assist others in a way. Meaning that a lot of people do not believe that they can help others unless their life is 100% fine or that everything is like right in their life. And what I would say to you is, no, it shouldn't take that. Like, we can help others, we can help each other, we can be there in a way where we are serving Source, we are serving in the best way we can, and we can do that without our lives being ideal or being perfect. How many people do you know who have achieved great things that had everything in their lives lined up in the way that they wanted it or the way that they thought it should be? And that's a problem. A lot of people think, oh, I can't be a mother until I have all my finances correct. I have, everything. I have a perfect relationship. I have a perfect home. I have this. There's all these like rules for when you're not allowed. When there's all these rules that people put into place that keep them from living their fullest life or the fullest version of their life. You don't have to wait for things to be lined up perfectly. You don't have to wait for things to be ideal for you to have an experience that will be beneficial to you. Yes, we should all work on our stuff, and yes, we should all work on things that we definitely need to nip in the bud. But to some extent, to the extent that we can't experience a life or help other people or do for others and serve until our life is perfect, that's a waste of time. You're basically wasting time at that point. We have established that for all corrective purposes, the first step is know that this fear, unless fear had entered the corrective procedure, would never have become necessary. If your miracle working propensities are not working, it is always because fear has intruded on your right-mindedness and has literally upset it, turned it upside down. The way I would describe it, and I'll use an example for this, the way that they're referencing this is, here's an example of this. So when I do this work, especially when I'm doing mediumship work, I have to be in a right state of mind. When I mean by right state of mind, meaning that I have to be three things. I have to be willing to be receptive and to be used. That's one thing that's important. I have to trust the process regardless of how others may react towards me. Trust that what I am doing is serving a grander purpose. And three is I need to be in a decent, like in a good state of mind. Because if I'm angry or super upset, I'm not going to be able to do this work. And so it's almost self-sabotaging for me to try to do this work when I'm upset or when I'm being affected mentally or emotionally by something. So the idea that I can just do this work and be in a bad state of mind or not be right in my mind when I'm doing it, it's not going to work out. It's not going to work out. And and the work that I'm doing, and that's just one example of serving the masses or serving other people. If you go forward and you're trying to act in service of God or in service of love or in service of your highest self, if you're waiting, you have to be in a good state. You have to be in the proper state. If you're not, then you're just not going to do your best work, and you're probably going to mess up a lot more, or you're going to probably get slapped back by the universe from some experience because you're going to feel as if you failed or as if you're not good enough. And that tends to happen whenever you try to work and go forward in service and in love, but you're not actually in that mental state. You're not actually in that proper state of being. For all forms of not right-mindedness are the result a refusal to accept the atonement for yourself. If the miracle worker does not accept it, he places himself in the position to recognize that those who need to be healed are simply those who have not done so. When you feel the vast radiation range of your own inner illumination, it will be because you are aware that your right-mindedness is healing. Let me read that again. All forms of not right-mindedness are the result of refusal to accept the atonement for yourself. In other words, if you do not believe that you are deserving or worthy of love or of this connection with Source, or you're not worthy of alignment with your ability or capacity, then what will happen is at that point you basically have shot yourself in the foot, and you've gotten in the way of yourself in receiving and being able to do, again, your best work. And that's just another version of what they were just talking about. And something that comes along is whenever you offer others love, whenever you offer others healing, you are the recipient of it as well. You will actually receive that as well. I remember back when I was learning how to do Reiki, and my teacher at the time, she says, when you give love, you get it. When you heal others in Reiki, you will also be healed in the process. And Reiki, for those of you who don't understand, Reiki is an old form of energy healing that is, I think it's based out of Japan. But that's something that I used to practice. And so you had to allow yourself to just surrender in and know that you were worthy enough to be used. And I especially with people who are like psychics or sensitive, sometimes like they will come to me like, just tell me that I'm psychic or verify that I have an ability. Like, why? What does that matter? What does it matter whether I tell you you have something or not? You get to choose what you have and what you don't have. And as I've said, everyone has the ability to do what I do. Everybody can do what I do. The only difference is that I've understood the process and I've practiced it for so long. That's the only difference. And I'm always growing and evolving myself in my practices. So it's not like I stop learning at any point. So for people who want to go to a psychic or are waiting for someone to just tell them, hey, you're gifted, you're supposed to do this. Why are you waiting for someone to tell you what you want to do? If that's something you want to do, sounds like you would want to do that, then you should do it. You shouldn't wait for someone to give you permission to do it. You shouldn't give someone you shouldn't wait for someone to give you permission to be the best version of yourself you want to be, even if it's something that you don't think you're that good at. It doesn't matter. You can still do it. You don't have to wait for anybody. Had I waited for someone to tell me that I was supposed to do this, because it didn't happen. It never happened. No one ever told me I was supposed to do this. People affirmed it after I was already doing it, but I waited. Like every time I would go and get a reading back before I was a professional psychic medium, I would go to psychics. I would go and, see what they were going to say to me or what they had to share or what, I wouldn't go in with questions. I just wanted to see what they had to say. And I kept waiting for them to say, Ferny, you're supposed to be a psychic. You're supposed to be a medium. You're supposed to do this. And so it never happened. They didn't tell me. And so what I decided was, you know what? I'm sick and tired of people. I'm sick and tired of waiting for somebody else to approve what I want to do. I'm just going to do what I want to do. And I will hope to God that I'm in alignment with my purpose in life and serving in the best way possible, which I was. I mean, your purpose in life is to live as yourself. So I was already there. But to be able to do this work and do it well and to get as far as I have with it to where it's my full job, it's my full-time job, that was my goal. And I was able to do that just because I stopped waiting around for someone to tell me I could do it. And I just decided I'm going to do it. And if I fail, then I fall flat on my face. And if I don't, then that will be the end of it. And I just did it. So I didn't wait for somebody to tell me. So for people who are waiting for someone to tell them, hey, tell me I'm special. Tell me I'm unique, Ferny. Tell me that I'm important. You are all those things and more, but you don't need to hear it from me. You need to hear it from yourself, and you need to tell it to yourself if you don't already believe it or know that to be true. All forms of not right-mindedness are the result of refusal. Oh wait, I already read that. Number 5, the sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept atonement himself. The sole responsibility of someone who is using synchronicities, who is using alignment, who is using the opportunity to essentially bring together the forces of the universe, to cause change or to love or healing. The sole responsibility of the miracle worker is to accept atonement himself, to allow themselves to be healed, to allow myself to receive a healing, to allow myself to just be loved. Like, that's the atonement, that's the wisdom, that's the peace within the self that comes from that. So you have to let yourself get to a place of peace within yourself. But that is the sole responsibility of the miracle worker, is to accept it within the self, which is what this is saying. This means that he knows that mind is the only creative level and that its errors are healed by the atonement. In other words, nothing can ever be destroyed. We are always creating 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Even if you try to destroy something, you're not destroying anything. You're not dissolving it. You're simply creating it in a different way that is very chaotic. That's what you're doing. So we never stop creating and we never fully destroy anything. We actually just create and then we create and then we create. So if someone goes and destroys or drops a bomb on another country, they didn't technically, by the principles of the universe and law of creation, they didn't destroy that. They simply created it or recreated it in a different form. Now it seems chaotic and it looks chaotic, but from what they did, something else will be created. Something else will come out of that. And so things come out of those situations. It's never just a destructive force and then a removal of something. It is a destructive creative act which produces other scenarios, other things from that. And that's what this is saying here. This means that he knows that mind is the only creative level and that its errors are healed by the atonement. Once he accepts this, his mind can only heal. By denying his mind and destructive potential and reinstating its purely constructive powers, he has placed himself in a position where he can undo the level of confusion of others. The messages which he then gives to others is the truth that their minds are really similarly constructive and that their own miscreations cannot hurt them, which is what I'm saying. We are always creating. We are always producing in this world, whether we see it as a creation or not. We're always creating something and bringing something into this experience, into this reality. And so you can't undo that. You can only create a newer stream of energy. So if you have lived a life that you are not proud of, if you have been someone you're not happy about, if you have experienced versions of yourself that you no longer wish to experience, then choose to be someone different and operate from the perspective that that is done. In other words, back when I was younger and I wasn't happy with who I was and I felt like I was a product of the conditioning of my life. I didn't want to be the product of a conditioning. I wanted to be who I chose to be. So I had to figure out a way to reinvent myself. And that's something we're all granted. We have the ability and the opportunity to reinvent ourselves in the image and likeness of that which we seek or that which we desire. And who I was just didn't serve me. So I decided I'm going to reinvent myself. And I did. And part of that for me was taking myself out of relationships, out of scenarios, out of situations that were only affirming who I was, wasn't really supporting or nurturing who I was choosing to be. So I had to take myself away from those situations. And that gave me the chance to really choose, truly, genuinely choose to be someone else and not have a constant reminder of what I was before or what I thought or what I expected myself to be. So I was able to reinvent myself and I was able to change who I was. And the things that I did that I wasn't proud of, I was able to move forward and create new versions and new things as well. And not only that, but I will say this also. I think every single person that I wronged or that I felt I wronged, either by saying something that was hurtful or by acting in a way where I felt I should have done differently, every single person that I feel I gave a bad version of myself to in some way or shape or form, they did in some way show back up in my life years later when I had already reinvented myself. And I was able to apologize and to make amends with every single one of those people, sometimes in very miraculous ways because synchronicities came in and helped me to do that. So I was able to go back and say, you know what, I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry that I treated you this way. I'm sorry I didn't appreciate you. I'm sorry that I said this. It was very hurtful. Like, I was able to go back and apologize. And I think that was more important for me, is to really have that opportunity. But the universe helped me to do that because I was reinventing myself and I was seeing myself in a new form. And I chose to operate from that perspective. And then life brought me healing and gave me chances to heal further than what I had planned or expected to. So just some food for thought. We have established that for all corrective purposes, the first step is know that this is fear. Unless fear had entered the corrective procedure, would never have become necessary. If your miracle working propensities are not working, it is always because fear has intruded in your right-mindedness and has literally upset it. And I already read this, but I'm going to... did I read it? I read all that. I'm like, where am I? I'm like, I already read all that. Thank you. Okay, I'm number 6. Thank you. By affirming this, the miracle worker releases the mind from over-evaluating its own learning device, the body, and restores the mind to its true position as the learner. It should be re-emphasized that the body does not learn any more than it creates. As a learning device, it merely follows the learner, but if it is falsely endowed with self-initiative, it becomes a serious obstruction to the learning it should facilitate. And what they're talking about here with this, that is not it. And that's the problem, is that the idea of spirituality is based on things and not on experience and not on connection. And that's what it really is about. And that's the most important thing there. So we lose sight of that because we get caught up in this thing. 7, only the mind is capable of illumination. Spirit is already illuminated, and the body in itself is too dense. The mind, however, can bring its own illumination to the body by recognizing that density is the opposite of intelligence and therefore amenable to independent learning. It is, however, easily brought into alignment with a mind which has learned to look beyond destiny towards light. So let me read that again, because now they're getting a little esoteric. Only the mind is capable of illumination, meaning that only the mind has the ability to perceive light or to perceive source or to perceive the energy within that spectrum. So let's just put it that way. You could also interpret that as that only the mind is capable of enlightening itself. You can do that as well. Spirit is already illuminated. Our spirit is already heightened. It's already in a higher state of awareness and a state of being. And the body in itself is too dense. The physical body will never bring about for someone to have an enlightened moment. It can give you experiences that could force you into, but it's never itself going to offer that. The mind, however, can bring its own illumination to the body by recognizing that density is the opposite of intelligence and therefore amenable to independent learning. In other words, let me read that line again because that line is important. The mind, however, can bring its own illumination to the body. The mind can bring about an experience within the physical body that is something that would be experienced from a heightened level of awareness, a heightened level of being. So the mind, however, can bring its own illumination to the body by recognizing that density, by recognizing that the structure, the structure of our body, the structure of this form, is the opposite of intelligence. So this structure, which again is this physical form, this physical body, this physical reality, is the opposite of intelligence. Is the opposite of understanding and comprehending. You don't need a physical body to understand and to intellectualize or to understand from that perspective. Your physical body is not going to produce that for you. The mind is what produces it, and the mind can overrun the body. The mind can. This is the mind over matter type thing. Mind over matter, and therefore unmenable to independent learning. It is, however, easily brought into alignment with a mind which has learned to look beyond density towards light. It is, however, easily brought into alignment with a mind which has learned to look beyond density towards light. A mind, what this is saying is mind, again, it's mind over matter, but what it's saying is that your mental capacity is so strong and so, it is the dominant factor in your state of being. Your mind is the dominant factor in your being. And so if your body is failing, or if your body is struggling, or if your body isn't what it is, what you would desire for it to be, you can overwrite the mechanisms of your body with the strength of your mental processes. But there has to be strength behind it. Just thinking positive or wishing isn't enough. You have to know yourself in truest form. If I know myself to be God, if I know myself to be this energy, as we all are, then I know the power that I possess. And if I walk around and if I act and if I operate with this understanding and this truth, really allowing it to settle in with me, and then also acting from a place of authority, then that in itself is propping me up and is going to allow me to be able to override any challenges that my body may bring up. Now, that doesn't mean that I'm not going to suffer or physically deal with shit, but it means that I can override what my body wants to do in many instances. Which is so funny because my partner, even though my partner, he's really healthy. I mean, he works out, he is very fit. And he eats very healthy, and he tries to stay very healthy. But his body is very sensitive, and it doesn't take a whole lot for his body to start to give him problems. And so I, who pay very little attention to my body, I'm able to. Those things don't bother me. Like if I'm dealing with something, I'm like, oh, well, whatever. And the way I think about it is, I remember this episode of Star Trek, and I use the episode of Star Trek. And in the episode, it's Star Trek Enterprise, where they're in a shuttlecraft, and there's 2 engines in the shuttlecraft. And one of the characters, they're trying to take off, and they manage to take off because they're in a hurry. So they manage to take off, and they're flying off, and one of the engines fails. And then they're like, well, if one of the engines fails, then the protocol is to land the shuttlecraft. You're not supposed to keep going, or you're not supposed to keep doing it. But one of the main characters, she says, ignore it, take us up. And so she's like, I don't care whether we have one engine or not. We're going to get there when we get there. And so the character's like, I don't care. I don't care if I have one leg, one foot, if something's missing, if this or that is happening. I don't give a damn. I'm still going towards what I need to go and do. And that's the mindset that I have. That's my mindset. If I have this going on or that going on, doesn't matter. I'm still going to do it because I got to do it. This is what I need to do. And so that's what we're talking about, the overriding of the mind. So the mind is intent on doing something, then to hell with the body. The body can break itself down if it wants to. I'm still doing it. It doesn't matter. The body is going to take its instructions from the mind. The body will start to act in ways that actually help to prop up itself because of the intent from the mind. It isn't going to happen every single time, again, remember, because if there is a destined experience you're supposed to go through, and if your body is supposed to produce an experience for you by breaking down in some way to force you to have experiences that you have destined yourself to have, then that's going to happen whether you will yourself to come out of that or not. But that's different from when your body is constantly having issues because you pay as much attention to it in that way, and you're not just moving forward in the direction of what you want to do. To hell with the body. The body can do whatever it wants to do. I'm still going to do what I want to do from that. So that's what I'm talking about with that. We'll stop there with the reading. Let me go over some of the questions because y'all have some really good questions, and I don't want to run out of time here with the content. So let's see. Cassidy's making some points here. She says, we need to be connected deeply to source, and our own life experiences help us to relate to others' challenges. 100%. Yeah, I think that we live in a world today, and I think this has always been the case, that most people don't care about others unless they have gone through the same experience, right? Because once something happens to them, then they automatically now suddenly care about everybody else and what they're going through, right? And that's what happens, right? So, right now we have, especially during last year with the pandemic, most people, when it comes to healthcare and everything like that, everybody's like, oh, everybody's on their own, do whatever. If you have health insurance, good for you. If you don't have health insurance, then that's your fault because you didn't get a job or because you didn't buy your health insurance or because you didn't take care of yourself or this or that. That's the mindset. The very self-involved, self-absorbed. It's only about me, what I get from this. And if you're suffering, that's on you because you didn't make the good decisions I made. And so then last year, everybody was in the same boat. And so it was pretty important. It was a big lesson for a lot of people to realize that all of us having good healthcare and all of us having access to healthcare in general is important. All of us being able to, to have this medicine or to have this or to have that, it's important. And so a lot of us were kind of humbled in a way last year because we were made to realize that we all suffer and struggle in very similar ways. And that's just one example. A lot of people had a lot of wake-up calls in the last year and a half. And most of us, through the experience of going through it ourselves, realized I can't just think about myself because if something happens, I also get screwed in the process when it's affecting everybody across the board. So we should have something in place that actually helps us all so that we can all get through it. It's the idea of like, people who receive money every month in some countries. In some countries, the government gave people a paycheck every month because they didn't know what was happening and the economy was plummeting. They were just trying to support their people to the best of their abilities, which I think is pretty appropriate if you've been paying towards a system your entire life. And we've been paying towards the government in taxes, so we should definitely be taken care of. That's the priority with that. The reason why we have a government is to make sure that our basic needs are met and that we're all taken care of. That's the primary reason for government, is to ensure that everybody's needs are met. Fortunately, that's not how we see it. Usually people see government a different way or that way. It doesn't matter. But when you start to go through something, when people lost their jobs, a lot of people lost their jobs, and suddenly they needed help. And then to see politicians with their bullshit arguing over this or arguing over that, when you need to pay for groceries, you're going to a food bank to get food. It's not fun to have to go through that. So it's important that, people take care of each other, that we all understand that we all have needs and we all should take care of each other. That's important. And most people don't realize that that is a better way to operate unless they're in a state where they've completely been screwed over in the process. And then all of a sudden they care. And that's the point I was making here, is that we shouldn't have to wait for us to go through something to care about another human being. We shouldn't have to wait for that. We should automatically start to form a sense of that within us, because in doing so, what's the harm in that? What's wrong with that? You tell me from a Christian perspective or from a human perspective, what is wrong with teaching yourself to care for other human beings' well-being before you've experienced something that they're struggling with? What is wrong with that? What is wrong with that? Because I think that would make this world a much more kinder, much gentler, much better place for all of us, don't you think? If a lot of us practiced caring for each other and each other's basic needs and avoiding certain experiences of suffering, because we all know that that is something that one of us, if not all of us, are go through. And I think that's important that we understand that. So, yeah, this will be in replay. So I do offer this in replay. It's usually on replay in all the platforms, so you can go back and you can watch it. Yeah, Cassidy's talking about reinventing herself, and she said to reinvent herself. And that's 100%. I've reinvented myself a couple of times. I think once in the beginning when I was figuring out who I was after I realized I was gay, and then I decided I was no longer going to claim to be Christian because it just didn't line up with my philosophy and what I was learning. I still respect and I still appreciate the rituals and the traditions of Catholicism, but I don't consider myself to be a Catholic because I just know better. I just know better than to align myself with something that just isn't going to serve me or help me to achieve in this world what I feel I need to achieve here in my everyday life. That was the first time I reinvented myself. The second time I reinvented myself was last year. I literally just went through another reinvention. And people who may have seen me at the beginning of last year or in 2019 in a video, I'm very different in personality and in the way that I express myself and in the way that I share than the way that I am now. In the way that I am now, I think I'm much more comfortable being myself and authentically being myself. That doesn't mean I wasn't authentic then. It's just it was more of a controlled version of that, if that makes any sense, right? So that's why. So and sometimes it's okay to reinvent yourself and to allow yourself to change because life has taught you differently or because you feel you need to adapt to what life is summoning within you. And sometimes when you're going through an experience, you're going through something, it's not a bad thing, though it may feel like it at first. Sometimes the negative experiences we go through are there to summon from us something that will actually serve us in the grander scheme of things. Okay, so let me go over here because some of you were mentioning things here on Instas. Let's see. Hey Rhonda, hey sweetheart. Let's see. Michelle's a good question. Michelle says, what if something starts going wrong in your life? How do we find the way to alignment? So if something starts going very wrong in your life, the last thing you should be concerned with is alignment. The first thing you should focus on is what do you need to do to resolve or to bring to resolution or to come to peace with whatever's happening. Because if it's something you have control over or you can change, you can definitely work on that. And that's something you need to focus on. So if something's going wrong, understand what your part is in all of that and choose to make it take steps and actions towards those changes. So that's first, deal with the practicality of this, because even at the end of the day, we're still human in a physical body. Just because we want to be in alignment and lined up with that energy and synchronicities doesn't mean that should be our priority. Our priority should be with dealing with the very human experience that we're going through. So if something's going terribly wrong, take whatever steps and measures necessary to address that in the best way possible. Once you come to a place of peace or you're comfortable with what you're doing to resolve that, then that opens up space within you. That opens up energy within you because all your energy should go towards resolving the issue or coming to peace with it. Once you're done there, then there's space and room available, and then you can begin to get back into a state of being that is sustainable for you. So here's an example of this. So back when I was in my last major relationship, I was with my ex for about 4 or 5 years, and I had moved around a few times because of him. But the last time we got together, and then broke up, was he had been dating somebody else and then decided that he still loved me and he couldn't get over that. So we both agreed that we would give it another shot. So I got all my stuff because I had been living at my sister's for a while. I was sleeping on her couch. So I got all my stuff, moved it in to the apartment that he and I shared. And then, we were together for 2 weeks. For 2 weeks. I did all of that, moved in for 2 weeks. After 2 weeks, it wasn't going to work, and that was it. We were done. And so I was like, I can't deal with this, and I have too much to be worried about. So I basically gave away a bunch of stuff that I just didn't want to worry about anymore, just because I felt like it was taking up energy to have to keep moving back and forth. So I just wanted to free myself up and reduce my baggage. So I just gave away a bunch of stuff. The stuff that I did take with me, I went ahead, and at that time, my mom, she was living, and she's in a one-bedroom apartment, the same apartment she's in right now. And she had room. She had a living room that was not furnished because she couldn't afford the furniture, and she had just plenty of space. So I moved in with her, and I was literally crashing on her living room floor for several months. And the first day I did it, I felt like a complete failure. I felt awful because I'm like, here I am, a store manager for Starbucks. I'm making pretty good money. I'm making the most amount of money I've made in my life, and I just moved out of my apartment that I was paying for with my ex, and I gave away a bunch of stuff. I only had some things left. I felt like I had lost everything, and I was just like down in the dumps. And so at first it felt awful. I felt horrible with the situation. But then I realized, okay, well, it is what it is. This is the situation. This is the reality of my life in this moment. I need to find a way to adapt to that and accept the fact that this is what it is and go with it. And so I turned that little corner of the living room into my little like haven. I had my laptop there because that's where I would watch my Netflix. I got up, I didn't have a bed, so I got a bunch of like bedding and I made it into a bed with all these layers of covers and stuff. And I put all my books there because I'm like, okay, well, I'm just going to use this time to study because if I have nothing else to focus on or worry about, I'm just going to read a whole bunch of crap. So I had all my books there as well. And then I also found plenty of time to catch up with friends and do stuff as well. But I didn't have anything physically to worry about because I was literally sleeping on the floor in my mom's living room. And that's what I did. And I did that for several months, but I made peace with it. This is the reality of my situation. This is what I have to deal with. I'm just going to roll with it. And I did the best that I could within that situation. And honestly, that for me was no different. Having that experience at that time was no different than when I actually had an apartment, had furniture, had, all the things, and I would still go home after work and I would read or I would watch Netflix. Literally had the same traditions or the same habits every single day. I repeated those habits, but just in that environment. And what I would say is, if you create habits based on what you were doing before, all the stuff went wrong. If you just start going back to your habits, repeating things that you did, it will actually help to stabilize you and anchor you in a sense of being so that you don't feel like you've lost yourself and you've completely become the product of whatever it was, which was the failing. That's a way to do it. That's one way that works for me. So when things go terribly wrong, deal with the issue first and then find a new way of living that is including some of your traditions or some of your habits, but also coming to peace with the fact that this is what it is. Make the best of it. Make the best of it. Red Robin, did it mean that it was okay to take a risk and give, not be so safe? So here's the rule with that. Here's the trick for that. If you're going to give anyone anything, whether it's your time or stuff or money or your heart, if you're going to give anything to anyone, come to peace within your mind that you may never get anything in return. So instead of giving it as a pressure to receive or as an obligation for them, give in the form of love without any expectation for any return. Because if you get used to giving to people without expecting anything in return, you will find yourself less heartbroken. You will find yourself less concerned with what they're doing, and you will actually not hinge your stability, your stability, your mental state of mind, your mental state will not depend on that situation. You're fine either way. And so if you give to others and you don't get anything back, that's fine. You don't have to. Now, if you have an agreement with those people, that's a different story. Having an agreement with someone is one thing. But if you give to others, just give and don't expect anything in return. And if you get in the habit of doing that, then there's no risk. There is no risk to you because you are who you are, whether you gave or you didn't give. You're still going to remain and sustain. But the idea of giving and then hoping for something in return is going to be heartbreaking for you, because if they're not able to, or they choose not to, you're essentially establishing your stability, and you're hinging your stability on what another person is doing, and it really shouldn't have anything to do with another person. So, for example, my partner, like, I love my partner to death, and I'm the breadwinner in the family, so I give whatever, and I try to offer as much as I can, as often as I can. With that being said, when you think of a normal partnership, both people should be working, both people should be giving, both people should be doing favors for each other, both people should be equals. It's not the kind of relationship I have. In my relationship, I don't expect anything from my partner other than just companionship and being able to exchange emotions or being able to exchange with each other in that way. That's all I expect. And even then, I don't expect that from him. He can be whoever he wants. So he doesn't have to do this for me. He doesn't have to prove to me this or that. Granted, there are times where maybe I want something, or maybe I want him to do this or to do that, but it doesn't ultimately matter, because I am not going to fall apart if my partner doesn't do this or doesn't do that. I'm not going to fall apart because I'm my partner and my partner can be who he wants to be. And in the beginning of our relationship, that was actually a challenge for me because I was still recovering from my last major relationship. And I wanted my partner to make up for what my ex never gave to me. And so I had all these expectations and all this pressure that I put on our relationship. And I kept comparing him, my partner, to the expectation or to this person or to that person I was with. And it actually caused more issues for us because I kept trying to change him. But when I stopped trying to change him and I just let him be, he became a much more authentic version of himself. And in some ways, he actually grew into roles and he became a person that I appreciate now to this day. I appreciate who he is. We're still very different people and we think and operate very differently, but I don't need him to be or do anything. I love him regardless and I'm going to continue to give whether he gives back or not. Doesn't matter to me because at the end of the day, it's about me having the opportunity and me being in the position where I can give. And that's what it's more important. That's what's more important and what it's about. So that's the way that I would suggest. If you're going to give to others, don't expect anything in return. Just give of yourself because you choose to, because you enjoy doing so. And if they want to give back, then appreciate that and enjoy it, but don't hinge your stability on that. Let's see, going through here. Correct, Jennifer's like, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. Correct, that is 100% correct. I think it's Emerson that said that. I think it's Emerson that made that comment or made that quote. Stardust Sarah, do you have to go into a meditative state? I find it very difficult to calm my mind. You know what's so interesting about meditation is that people do not fully understand the role of meditation. Meditation is just a tool, another tool. People who want to meditate to become more psychic or more sensitive, and they meditate to quiet their mind, in some ways it could be helpful because every day you have thoughts going through your brain that has to do with your everyday life, all the stuff that you deal with every single day. And so if that's all you're obsessing about, like your body or this or that, then there's no space or no room for you to pay attention to anything else. And so when you meditate on nothing or you try to meditate to quiet your mind, you're essentially dumbing down or dulling that part of your processing, your mental processing ability, and you're going to pay less attention to those everyday thoughts. To some extent, that helps you to become more sensitive to other thoughts, to other energies. But if you're meditating to quiet your mind or to completely shut everything down because you think that by shutting everything down, all of a sudden you're going to suddenly be psychic or all these magical experiences are going to happen. Unicorns are going to come out of your butthole. That's not going to happen, y'all. It's not going to occur with that. And so in order for you to really get the most out of meditation, if you're trying to develop yourself psychically, you need to just learn to pay attention to your thoughts. So it's not really about quieting your thoughts. It's about paying attention to your thoughts and then learning to distinguish the difference between everyday thinking stuff that has to do with all of our stuff, all of our everyday problems, and the thoughts that pop in your head that have nothing to do with any of that are random pieces of information that are getting dumped into your mind by your higher self or by your psychic senses. And so it just depends on what kind of meditation you're talking about. So let's see. Michelle's like, what if you fix, then you can't fix and you're lost? Now that depends. If you're trying to fix another person or a situation with another person, then fixing is a waste of time because it's one thing to offer someone support and help and nurturing energy. That's helpful to them and let them fix themselves. But to fix them, that's not going to happen. You can't fix anybody else. When it comes to your life and your personal experience, you have a lot of control over that and there's a lot you can do with that. But if what you're trying to achieve for yourself is not happening and it's not working, then it means that maybe that is not something you need to be focused on, or maybe you need to make peace that is how it is and decide to completely change the game. If you are driving in an orange jalopy and the vehicle is not working, it won't even turn on, then don't keep trying to work with the jalopy or accept the jalopy. Just accept the fact that jalopy is not going to work and then jump into a different vehicle or make another way for yourself because it's just not working. And that's the hint. That's the message from that. The reason why I went into being a psychic medium is because I could not stand working at Starbucks anymore. anymore. And all the other companies that I was applying with, I would only go so far into the interview process, and then something would be created where it didn't work out. Oh, we hired within, or oh, we thought we were going to need somebody, we didn't, and so we actually decided that we were just going to roll that into a new position. Like these weird things, and it wasn't about someone else getting hired in my place, because I was totally capable and I was actually really perfect for those jobs. It's just that was not the path for me. And so I could say, I keep trying and trying and trying to be stable, but this keeps happening, that keeps happening. And so instead I said, you know what, I'm just going to focus on my business and this, because what other choice do I have? And what I'm trying isn't working. And that's what I did. And it actually blossomed fairly quickly for me. And that was the right decision for me. I just didn't realize it at the time. Red Robin said, can anyone be the miracle worker at some time in their life if they are atoned? So the idea of being a miracle worker simply means that you are acknowledging your divinity, that you are aware of your interconnectedness with all things, and that you desire to offer others who are simply reflections of yourself, offer others a path of less suffering in this form while we're here. And so that's all a miracle or a light worker is. So you have a lot of people who give themselves the title of light worker, but that is literally and essentially what a light worker is. Being aware of your divinity, understanding the interconnectedness with all that is, seeing yourself in the reflection that is offered by other people, and then offering to reduce suffering for them, and in the process reducing suffering for yourself as well, and just imbuing love. That is a light worker. If a person isn't doing that, they're not a light worker. They may call themselves that, but they're not a light worker. And so when you're talking about being a miracle worker, and and if they have atoned, you don't have to heal 100% or even heal to help other people. You don't have to do that. You can simply help other people. And in the process of helping other people, you will also receive healing in the process. You see what I'm saying? It's the opposite of what you're saying. So you don't have to wait for yourself to be a miracle worker or a light worker or for all the synchronicities to happen. You can just offer to help other people in a way that you desire, in a way that you choose, and then you will actually start to receive the benefit of that as well, because you're essentially giving love to others, but others is not something separate from you. Others are just a reflection of you, because we're all source and form. So you see what I'm saying? So when helping others and loving others, you're also helping yourself in the process, because it's all the same. Yeah, each person does need to follow their own truth to the point that it doesn't cause or create further suffering for others. Because if people have a belief in something, and their belief and their actions are producing suffering for other people, then they are also creating suffering. They are also producing more suffering in this world. Then the truth is, there's something off with their truth. There's something off with the idea. So you have people who are like, I want to change the world, so I'm going to go and kill the enemy. Okay. So you want to change the world for the better. You want to produce a more loving, a more generous, a more stable world. So your idea of doing so is to create an act that actually produces more suffering, more pain, and basically disregards the creation, that being life. Those two don't connect. They don't work together. Granted, we are in a world where people go off to war and they fight for this and they fight. I understand the reality of this world and this reality, this physical reality. I get it. But if you truly and authentically want to produce a more loving, generous, compassionate world, you have to act from a place of that. And I know a lot of people who do not. That's actually what my podcast was about, that I just put out this morning, and also the article that I just wrote. So y'all look into that, because I go into that in great detail. Manifesting is not a thought process. A thought is simply an idea or a potential. So manifestation doesn't occur from simply thought. Thought is the first stage of manifestation. So the idea or the thought, the idea, the potential is step number one. Step number two is embodying that to the best of your ability. So embodying that in mind, embodying that in emotion, embodying that in will or intent or action. That is the second step of manifestation. So if your thought doesn't match up to your emotion, then you're basically misaligned. If your thought, your emotion, and your action all line up and they're all consistent, there's a continuity there, then you're probably beginning to form a manifestation that you will bring into your life. Doesn't mean that everything's going to show up the way you think it is, but it will show up in one way or another. And then the third stage of that has to do with faith. And they don't talk about faith, but faith is the third part of that. That what I am in this form is the embodiment of God. And if I choose a thing, it is. That is the faith. That is the belief.